Okay, so I'm looking at this head turn animation that I created in Anime Studio and exported in vector format, imported into Flash, and re-exported as an SWF vector movie. And this was a project that I built in stages. I didn't really plan to do a head turn when I started out with this animation. It was really just a way for, it was just something I kind of tacked on after I started working on a feather animation, which I created using particles. And I've been experimenting pretty heavily with Anime Studio's particle system, and this is a feature you really don't usually see in 2D animation packages. It's something that's really more a motion graphics type thing, and you know, for a kind of more high-end type industry. But this is a really good program for something like that. Anyway, I want to talk about this particular animation, which again, I created this with actions, shape morphs, bones. There's all kinds of tricks that are going on here, but it's mainly being driven by 2 actions and 2 bones with some minor point motion to kind of smooth out a little bit of the animation and some of the rough parts where the model's turning. And first of all, why don't we just watch the animation? You'll notice that I used kind of a angel singing in the background, because every time you do a head turn, that's how it feels, because it takes a lot of work, and it's one of the hardest things to do, but it's the first thing that everyone wants to do, because head turns are just, you know, we focus on the head, and that's the first thing that grabs our attention. Our eyes go right there automatically. Very difficult to do, and you know, there's a lot of different tricks that you have to know in order to pull one off successfully. But again, we attempt it, and it looks pretty good in this case. I was pretty happy with it. In fact, it turned out a lot better than I was expecting. Now let's move on to the good stuff. As you can see, I've opened up a brand new Anime Studio project file, and let's check the settings. Alright, now I like to set the width to 640, the height to 480, and the frame rate to 30 frames per second. Start frame is on frame 1. The end frame, I'll make it to frame 90. That's a nice even number. That's 3 seconds worth of animation at 30 frames per second. Okay, now if we need to change the length of the animation, that's easy enough to do, but for now I'm pretty happy with these settings. Okay. Alright, now the first thing I want to do before I start constructing my character and going about creating a head turn is going over a little bit about actions. And it's a very powerful feature that Anime Studio offers you, and it takes a lot of the sting out of doing straight-on point motion, but it still has the flexibility of point motion, and you can do some really powerful effects with minimal amount of work. So now, you know, before I mentioned that head turns are extremely difficult to do. Well, Anime Studio is almost designed to make head turns as easy as possible. And it does that mostly by shape morphing. Actions play a big part in making that happen. Okay, so I'm on frame 0, as you can see, and I'm going to create a shape. In this case, it's just going to be a generic circle shape. And I'll give it a little color here. Let's see, I'll go with blue. And we'll call this layer the face layer. Now I'll create a new vector layer. I'll call it the eyes and mouth layer. Alright. And on the eyes and mouth layer, okay. Alright, so we've got a nice little Mr. Smiley face going on here. Now, with actions, whenever you create actions, you really should be applying them to a main folder that contains a bunch of sub-layers. Because if you create an action on this top layer, that action will be available to all of its sub-layers. And that's a very powerful feature about actions that we're going to explore in just a moment. But let's create our first action. Actions can only be created on, well, they can be created on any frame except frame 0. So you've got to move your cursor. In this case, I'm just going to move it to frame 1. And I'll open up my actions window. And I'll create a new action. In this case, I'll call it front view. No, 3/4 view. Alright, now if you notice the timeline, the background color changed from white to a skyish, bluish looking color. And that tells you that you're now in the action timeline. And the action timeline really doesn't exist in the main timeline. It's only, it's best to probably think of it as kind of an alternate reality. No matter what you do in this action timeline, it's not going to affect the main timeline at all until you apply it to the main timeline. So we can just go crazy. Now, since I'm in a vector layer, I like to use actions as a single keyframe action, meaning I only create action on one frame. I only make my changes on one frame of animation. So here, I've got the folder selected. And for those of you that don't own Anime Studio Pro, you can use bone layers, which are basically the same as group folders. Except with bone layers, you have the added functionality of being able to add bones. Okay, so I create a keyframe here on the layer transition. This is just to tell me it's a visual cue when I apply the action to the main timeline that an action exists at this particular frame. You'll see what I mean by that later. Now, let's go to the eyes and mouth layer. And I'm going to take the magnet tool and zoop. See if I can. All right, that's good. Now, let's go to the main timeline. And as you can see, no changes, all of the changes that we made on the action timeline had no effect on the main line. Now I'm going to create another action, and I'm going to call this front view. Oh, no. Let's delete that. Look, I just made a mistake here. I created that action on the eyes and mouth layer, meaning it's only going to be available to that eyes and mouth layer.